We're starting a new series of discussions, we're calling it Asking for a Friend, trying to talk about some of the questions that a lot of Christians probably have or have had, but never really talk about in church. Sometimes it seems like asking these questions can show we don't have enough faith, or sometimes we're afraid if we ask these questions, there aren't any good answers. And I don't know that I'm going to provide good answers or not. I'm going to try, but I'm not sure there'll be good answers. But today's question is one that I've had asked several different times through the years when trying to witness to somebody about the Lord. And then the question goes more or less like this: how do we know that the God you're talking about is the only true God? How do we know that the God you're advertising or the God that you're promoting is the God that everybody should obey? And that argument comes out two or three different ways. You know, if I was living in the Middle East and I was in a Muslim country, isn't it likely that I would think that Islam was the right thing? Or if I was living in Southeast Asia and everybody around me was a Buddhist, or in India and everybody around me was Hindu, isn't it likely that that's what I'd believe? And so maybe the reason I'm believing it here is because we're in America. And how do we know your way is any better than anybody else's? One quote that when I first heard it really kind of rattled my cage was this one by Stephen Roberts. "I believe," he says, "in one less God than you do. So you tell me why you don't believe in all those gods, and I'll tell you why I don't believe in yours." And on the surface, that's pretty shrewd sounding. There have been other atheists who have kind of taken that line of thinking in some of their arguments. I heard Ricky Gervais do one of his routines, and he kind of riffed off of this idea. And again, on first glance, it is pretty compelling. But if you think about it very long at all, it breaks down. First of all, it's kind of a silly thing to say. If a little kid was in class and he's trying to get his math problem right, and he writes down 2 + 2 = 5, and then no, teacher says, and 2 + 2 = 6, no, 2 + 2 = 3, no. And so finally the teacher says, listen, 2 + 2 = 4. And he says to the teacher, well, why is your answer any better than mine? And she says, well, it just is. It's the truth. And he says, I tell you what, you show me why you don't believe any of my answers, and I'll tell you why I don't believe. And that's crazy, right? I mean, this whole line of thinking presupposes that all of it's not real, that all of it's just a guess anyway. And if it's all just a guess anyway and none of it's real, then who's to say that your guess is any less or more real than mine, right? It breaks down if there is a right answer. Sometimes in a business meeting, a young person who's new to the organization, or maybe not young, but they're new to the organization, they say, well, hey, why don't we try this and this idea? And somebody who's been there for a long time says, oh, no, we tried that idea 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and it doesn't work. You know, we know that it doesn't work. And the new person's frustrated. Well, you don't know that it doesn't work with me. You don't know that it doesn't work with this new way of trying it. You don't know that it doesn't work in this new time. I mean, the whole nature of any sort of scientific inquiry is that if there is a true answer, all the other answers are going to fall down first. You know, one thing this assumes, this line of argument, is more of a polytheistic worldview, that there's lots of gods out there, and they're all designed to explain little things to us, right? I mean, maybe there's a God of the sun, or a God of love, or a God of family, or a God of death. And when we try to understand those complicated concepts, we can look to those gods and figure. And that's really how the Greeks and the Romans and the Egyptians and the Norse and all sorts of different organizations, nationalities, groups, people. That's how they handled things. They would assign a god to be in charge of whatever area that was, and it allowed them to explain the area. It allowed them to explain how thunder works. It allowed them to explain where people go when they die. Whenever the confusing thing came up, it was a way to handle that deal. And almost all polytheistic societies work that way, and they had lots of gods and lots of different ways to talk about it. But Jesus kind of comes in and goes a different direction. And Jesus kind of challenges that whole notion. He says, I'm not just one of a bunch of gods. He says, I'm the way and the truth and the life, and no one gets to come to God except through me. Well, I mean, That's different than any of the polytheistic stuff. I mean, normally, when the Greeks were the empire of the whole world, well, then everybody worshipped Zeus and they worshipped Poseidon, and they worshipped Hades. They worshipped the Greek gods, right? But then when Rome came and conquered, well, then suddenly those Greek gods became Roman gods, and instead of worshiping Zeus, we just worship Jupiter. Instead of Poseidon, we worship Neptune, and the old gods just morphed into new personalities, and it was fine. And you see that happen over and over again. In fact, when they decided, the Romans, that Julius Caesar needed to become a god, it was easy to insert him into the pantheon. And nobody really questioned that, because the whole purpose of the pantheon was to explain how things are and to explain how things work. And if adding a guy like Caesar in there, well, great, that doesn't hurt Aphrodite's worship, and we can just add him into everything else we do, and adding the one more doesn't subtract any others. Sometimes you see that even today in a like Hinduism, where a person might be won over to Christ, you think, but really all they've done is added Christ to their big pantheon of gods. But Jesus claims something different. He says, I'm the way, I'm the truth, I'm the life, and no one can come to the Father, come to God, except through me. Well, this is a whole different way of looking at things. It's a whole different way of imagining things. When Jesus comes and makes this claim, it kind of separates him from all the other religions. It makes Christianity not very inclusive. And it's hard then, when somebody says things like this, to just group them into a bunch of other ideas. There's kind of a popular a thought when trying to think about religions, and it's the 6 blind men and an elephant. You may have heard this parable before. We think it originated through Buddhism, and around about the same time Buddhism was taken off. But the notion of it is there were 6 blind men, and they're looking at an elephant, and they're trying to figure out what it is. And one of them's up here on the top looking at the ears, and he can feel the wind that they're flopping around. Well, it's a fan, is what the one guy says. And the other guy feels the tusk. Well, it's a spear. The one feels the trunk. No, it's not a spear, it's a snake. And one is on the giant legs and thinks it's a tree, and one is holding the big side of the deal. It's a wall. And then one guy's at the end with the tail. It's a rope. And the lesson of the parable, as told, was that, see, they all just see what they can see, right? And so to them, it may be different than it is somebody else, but in the parable, they're all telling the truth. That's how the parable, the Hindu, the Buddhist Hindu parable works, is that they're all telling the truth, right? And in America, sometimes the notion, it's all just different roads up the same mountain. Right, we're all heading up the same mountain, and because we're all heading up the same mountain, everybody's taking their own path, and we're all doing the best we can. But again, this one falls down too, and it falls down for the same reason that the other one did. It imagines that there's not a true answer. See, the problem with this one here is the limitations of the guys trying to figure it out, our limitations, right? There is a right answer. We just have a hard time seeing it. And at some level, that should give us some real sympathy to people who do approach it different. 1 Peter 3:15, always be prepared to give an answer to those who ask you for the hope in which you believe, but do it with gentleness and respect. Everybody's come to the place they've come to on their own, and they're doing the best they can. That's what that parable should teach us, the blind men and the elephant. Everybody's doing the best they can. But again, there is a right answer. And we're told that the right answer from Jesus is it's him. Jesus makes that claim, right? I've heard a version of the elephant parable that's a little different. It's 6 blind elephants and a man, and the 6 blind elephants are trying to figure out what it was. So the first elephant feels the man and says, men are flat. And the other elephants feel and go, hey, yeah, that's right. And they all go out and get some peanuts. The difference between the second parable and the first, is that it's elephants, but the similarity between the two parables is that the limitation of the person trying to figure it out, right? They're limited by their own perspective. Okay, in such a situation, then what do you have to do? Well, to me, it makes the most sense then to rely on it becomes more important then to see who you're investing in. Now, certainly, there are a lot of Christians or people who claim to be Christian who are not worth you investing in. We see low-character Christians all the time, and sometimes those low-character Christians can build big television ministries and huge churches, and it comes out later that maybe that they particularly had some real skeletons in their closet or real flaws. And I can appreciate how if you get your feelings hurt by somebody like that or read about it in a magazine or in the paper or on the internet, you could say, well then, who can I trust? But I want you to go back further than the little messengers. You need to go back to Jesus. Jesus is the one who says, I'm the way and the truth and the life, and no one comes to the Father except by me. Jesus is the one who lived and died and rose again. Jesus is the one whose followers immediately claimed he was resurrected. And while it would be kind of hard today in 2023 to produce a corpse, it would not have been hard for the Roman authorities then to do it. But they couldn't. There were witnesses coming forward who said they saw Jesus, that they talked to him, that they touched him, that they had meals with him. And all those guys died. And you know, there's just not much anywhere to suggest that you would go to your death, and in the case of those men, a torturous, hard life followed by a torturous, hard death. You don't do it for a lie. Now I might die for a lie if I don't know it's a lie. If you tell me that I can fly and I believe that you're right when you tell me that and I jump off a building and die, then I'll have died for a lie. But I didn't know it was a lie, right? I won't tell you that I can fly, knowing full well that I can't, and then jump off a building. I mean, I won't die for the lie. But all those guys who said they saw Jesus, who hung out with him, that they had meals with him, that they touched him, that they were in the same room with him, they all died for it. And I just am skeptical that would happen for something they knew was not true. Jesus is the one who lived. You know, normally when someone in that kind of a prophet of some sort, when they die, their followers venerate the tomb. We could go today. You wouldn't be allowed to get to it, but you could get close to it to see where Muhammad is buried. You could go and see where Confucius is buried. You could see Buddha has been separated, but you could go see Buddha's tooth or maybe his arm bone or leg bone. I mean, you could go into these places where the dead follower or the dead leader is, and his followers from the very beginning have done that in the same way that we might put flowers on the side of the road where someone died. I mean, if they're precious to you, right, you immediately venerate that place. It's a human response that has been constant since the very beginning, as far as we can tell. And yet when Jesus died, his followers did not do that. We really have no idea where Jesus' tomb is. There's a place you can go to in Jerusalem that the Catholic Church has decided is their best guess, but that wasn't their best guess till several hundred years after Jesus died. And even then, we're not sure. There's another place you could go to in Jerusalem. They say, well, no, this is really where it happened, and we don't know. It was never venerated right off. You know, even Elvis, and people think that Elvis, his most devoted followers, think that he didn't really die, but they still venerated the tomb because they even though they say it, they were pretty sure he died. But with Jesus, they never did it. Again, there's just no point. It's like celebrating a peanut shell. Once you've ate the peanut, I mean, the shell doesn't matter anymore. It's just some place that they were once. You know, it just doesn't matter as much. And Jesus, from the very beginning, demonstrated, both in his words and then later in his resurrection and life, that he is a prophet different than any other prophet. And he's a prophet that you can trust. Colossians chapter 4, verse 5 and 6 says, be wise in the way you act towards outsiders, make the most of every opportunity. Let your conversation be full of grace, seasoned with salt, and know how to answer everyone. You know, as Christians, we are in a world of increasingly a culture full of people who are antagonistic, not even about Christianity, but about the whole idea of Christianity. And it's hard in such a world to want to speak up. If you do, people are going to find all sorts of ways to challenge what you believe, and it'll be hard sometimes to think of answers for the arguments. Sometimes in those deals, it can be so frustrating you can wonder if there even is an answer. But that's the thing with truth. If there is a true answer, we can find it. And I believe that Jesus, over and over and over again, shows himself to be true. I just invite you to study into it. And if you can get into some of these kinds of conversations with outsiders, man, don't be scared of that. In fact, kind of be encouraged. Try to be as graceful as you can. If you don't know, say you don't know. And challenge their thinking too. If Jesus is right, it's worth any sacrifice you'll make towards it to tell the world who he is.